The galactic Concord had ruled the stars. For 12,000 years, it was a government, made of 47 different alien species, spread across hundreds of star systems. They believed in order, they believed in logic, they believed that peace came from following rules and never breaking them. For thousands of years this system worked perfectly. Then humanity arrived. Humans had only discovered faster than light traveled 200 years ago. In that short time, they had spread from their small blue planet called Earth to dozens of new worlds. They built cities on moons. They created space stations around gas giants. They traded with aliens, learned their languages, and made friends wherever they went, but they also made enemies. The aliens of the conquered watched humanity with growing concern. Humans were loud. They laughed too much. They cried too easily. They fell in love with species that looked nothing like them. They started businesses that grew too fast. They invented things without asking permission. They asked questions that made the elder species uncomfortable. Most of all, humans were unpredictable. The conquered had spent thousands of years creating a society where everything could be calculated and predicted. Humans broke those calculations just by existing. Captain Jack Morrison stood in the great chamber of Prime. The room was enormous, carved from a single piece of blue crystal that glowed with soft inner light. Around him, hundreds of alien delegates sat in floating seats arranged in a perfect circle. Some had scales, some had fur, some had no bodies at all, existing only as clouds of glowing gas, contained in special suits. Jack was tall with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served humanity in space for 30 years. He had seen wonders that most people could never imagine, but today, standing in this beautiful room, he felt only dread. Beside him stood Lieutenant Kate Holloway. She was younger, with short brown hair and quick eyes that never stopped moving. Her job was to translate the alien languages into words Jack could understand. Right now she was very quiet. High Arbiter Zenthal rose from the central platform. It was an insectoid creature standing nearly 3 m tall. Its body was covered in black kitten that gleamed like polished armor. It had 4 arms, 2 legs, and a head with compound eyes that saw in every direction at once. When it spoke, its voice was like dry leaves scraping against stone. The vote has been completed, Zenthal announced. The matter of humanity's membership in the Galactic Concord has been decided. Jack felt his heart beating faster. He had known this moment was coming. There had been complaints about humans for decades. They were too aggressive in business. They formed emotional bonds with other species that complicated diplomatic relations. They invented technologies without proper safety reviews. They treated the ancient traditions of the conquered like suggestions rather than laws. By a vote of 41-6, Zenthal continued, humanity is hereby expelled from conquered space. The chamber erupted in clicking, chirping, and humming sounds of approval. Jack stood frozen. He had expected this, but hearing the words still felt like a punch to his chest. You have 90 standard days to evacuate all human colonies within conquered territory, Zenthal said. All trade agreements are dissolved. All diplomatic missions are closed. Humanity is no longer welcome in civilized space. Kate's hand found Jack's arm. He could feel her trembling. On what grounds? Jack demanded. His voice echoed through the crystal chamber. The clicking sound stopped. Hundreds of alien eyes turned to look at him. On grounds of incompatibility, Zenthal replied. Its compound eyes showed no emotion. Humanity is chaos. You breed conflict wherever you go. You destabilize economies with your reckless innovation. You form emotional attachments that compromise diplomatic objectivity. You do not follow rules. You do not respect tradition. You do not belong here. Jack wanted to argue. He wanted to list all the good things humanity had done, the diseases they had cured, the planets they had helped terraform, the wars they had helped end. But looking at the sea of alien faces, he knew it would change nothing. The decision was made. We came to you in peace, Jack said quietly. We only wanted to be your friends, and that is precisely the problem, Zenthal replied. The conquered does not need friends, the conquered needs order. Humanity brings disorder, therefore humanity must leave. As Jack and Kate walked out of the chamber, only one delegate watched them with something other than satisfaction. Trell was a Valoran, a species that looked like large cats walking on four legs. Its fur was silver and its eyes were deep gold. It had been one of the 6 who voted against expulsion. Trell caught Jack's eye and gave a small nod. It was not much, but it was something. At least one alien in this galaxy did not hate humanity. The journey back to the starship Endurance was silent. The ship waited in orbit above Prime, its gray hull scarred from years of service. It was not a warship, just a simple diplomatic vessel, but today it felt like the loneliest ship in the universe. In the briefing room, Jack gathered his senior officers. Chief Engineer Danny Park was a small man with clever hands and a mind that never stopped working. Medical Officer Lisa Vance was tall and calm with a voice that could soothe any fear. Security Chief Ben Torres was built like a fighter with scars on his arms and kindness in his eyes. They looked at their captain and waited. They voted us out, Jack said. He sat down heavily in his chair. 41-6. We have 90 days to leave. 41 today, 41 today, 41 today, 41 today, 90 days. Danny said we have 12 colonies in conquered space, millions of people. How are we supposed to evacuate everyone in 90 days? We will find a way, Lisa said. We always do, Ben Torres said. Nothing. His fists were clenched at his sides. What did we do wrong? Kate asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. We followed their laws. We tried so hard to fit in. What did we do? Jack looked at his crew. These were good people. They had dedicated their lives to building bridges between humanity and the galaxy. And now those bridges were burning. We did nothing wrong, Jack said. We were simply ourselves. And apparently that was too much for them to handle. He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly in every direction. Somewhere out there was Earth, the small planet where humanity had been born. Somewhere out there was home. They do not want us, Jack said quietly, so we go home. We take care of our people. We build our own future. He turned back to face his crew. And we wait for what? Ben asked. Jack smiled, but there was no joy in it. Wait for the day they realize what they have lost. The Endurance turned away from Valos Prime and jumped into hyperspace. Behind it, the galactic conquered celebrated the removal of its greatest annoyance. They did not know it yet, but they had just made the biggest mistake in their 12,000-year history. Humanity was going home, but humanity would not forget. And one day, the galaxy would learn why. You should never turn your back on the most stubborn species in the universe. 5 years passed after humanity left. Conquered space, at first the alien species celebrated, the council meetings ran smoothly, trade routes operated on perfect schedules. There were no more arguments about human businesses growing too fast. There were no more complaints about humans asking too many questions. The chaos was finally gone, but so was something else, something the aliens did not notice at first. On the mining world of Keth 4, a supervisor named Vex stood in front of a broken drilling machine. The Relians were a species of tall, thin beings with gray skin and large black eyes. They were excellent workers, but they were not inventors. They followed instructions perfectly, but they never changed those instructions. The machine is broken, Vex said to his crew. We must wait for a replacement part from the central factory. That will take 40 days. One of his workers said, the quota will not be met. Vex nodded. There was nothing else to do. Before the humans left, there had been a human engineer on Keth 4. Her name had been something simple, maybe Amy or Annie. Vex could not remember, but he remembered how she would look at broken machines with a strange light in her eyes. She would take them apart, study them, and then put them back together in new ways. Sometimes her repairs worked better than the original design. What if we tried it differently, she would always say. And then she would try something that was not in any manual. Sometimes it failed, but sometimes it worked beautifully. Now there was no one to ask that question. The machine stayed broken for 40 days. This scene repeated across conquered space, without humans, constantly tinkering and experimenting. Innovation slowed to almost nothing. New inventions, which had appeared every few months during humanity's time in the conquered, now appeared once every few years. Art became repetitive. Music for the species that created it grew predictable and boring. Ambassador Trell, the Valoran who had voted against human expulsion, now served on the border worlds far from the conquered center. It was a quiet post, almost a punishment for supporting humanity, but Trell did not mind. The border was the only place where you could still see the stars that led to human space. Every night Trell would look at those stars and wonder what humanity was doing. Were they angry? Were they sad? Were they planning revenge? Trell did not know. The conquered had forbidden all contact with human space. No clear throat ships went in. No messages came out. It was as if humanity had simply disappeared. But humanity had not disappeared. Humanity had been very, very busy. In the quarantined human territories, Admiral Sophie Grant stood on the observation deck of the orbital station's light. She was 60 years old now, with white hair and eyes that had seen too much. But her back was straight and her voice was strong. Below her, the shipyards of New Terra worked day and night. Sparks flew as robots and human workers welded together the hulls of new starships. These were not trading vessels or diplomatic ships. These were warships, bigger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. Report, Sophie said. Commander Danny Park walked up beside her. He had aged too, his black hair now streaked with gray, but his clever mind was sharper than ever. 12 new heavy cruisers completed this month. The Dreadnought Horizon is ahead of schedule. We expected to be ready in 6 Weeks and the new engines, Chris and Amy Lawson finished the final tests. Yesterday, the new drive systems are 30% faster than anything the Concorde has. And the power efficiency is almost double. Sophie nodded. The Lawsons were husband and wife, both brilliant scientists. Before the expulsion, the Concorde had forbidden research into certain types of technology, too dangerous, they said, too unpredictable. But humanity no longer followed Concorde rules. Medical advances, Sophie asked. Lisa Vance and her team have extended the average human lifespan by 20 years. They are working on treatments for diseases that the Concorde said were incurable. Sophie smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. They pushed us out because we were too creative, too willing to take risks, too human. She looked down at the shipyards, at the thousands of people working to build humanity's future, so we will become something they cannot ignore. On the colony world of New Haven, a young man named Ethan Cole sat in a flight simulator. He was 23 years old, with dark hair and green eyes that focused on the screen in front of him with complete concentration. His hands moved across the controls as he fought against simulated enemy ships. The simulation ended. He had won, but barely. Your reaction time is good, a voice said behind him. Commander Maria Santos walked into the simulator room. She was in her 40s with short gray hair and a face that rarely smiled. She had been a pilot before becoming an instructor, one of the best in the human fleet. But you hesitate when you need to make hard choices. I am working on it, Ethan said. Work faster. Maria sat down across from him. Do you know why we train so hard, Ethan? To be ready, Ethan said, to protect humanity. Yes, but also because one day the galaxy will need us again. Maria looked at him with serious eyes. The Concorde thinks they are better off without us. They think their order and their rules will keep them safe forever, but the universe is not safe. The universe is full of dangers that logic and order cannot defeat. Ethan thought about his parents. They had died during the evacuation from their colony, killed in an accident caused by the rushed departure. He had been 18 years old, suddenly alone in a universe that had rejected his entire species. And when they call for help, Ethan asked, after everything they did to us. Maria was quiet for a long moment. Then we answer because that is what humans do. We help people even when they do not deserve it, even when it hurts, even when every logical argument says we should let them suffer. That does not sound logical. Maria finally smiled. No, it sounds human, and that is exactly why the galaxy needs us, whether they know it or not. Ethan went back to his training. He practiced every day, pushing himself harder and harder. Around him, thousands of other young humans did the same. They learned to fly, they learned to fight, they learned to think fast and act faster. The Concorde had called them chaos. The Concorde had called them dangerous. Concorde had been right, but chaos and danger were not always bad things. Sometimes they were exactly what the universe needed. 5 years after the expulsion, humanity was stronger than ever. Their ships were faster, their weapons were more powerful, their people were more determined. They had taken the pain of rejection and turned it into fuel for growth. And far away in the cold darkness between galaxies, something ancient was beginning to wake up, something hungry, something that had slept for 50,000 years, something that would soon remind the conquered why chaos and unpredictability were not weaknesses, they were survival traits. Humanity did not know what was coming, but when it arrived they would be ready. They had spent 5 years preparing for a moment they could not predict. That was the most human thing of all. The quiet years were almost over. The storm was about to begin. The Kethi had been sleeping for 50,000 years. They were not like other species in the galaxy. They were not made of flesh and blood. They were made of living crystal, silicon-based life form that existed as a single hive mind. Billions of bodies, one consciousness, one hunger. Long ago, before they conquered existed, the Kthvari had nearly consumed half the galaxy. They moved from world to world like a plague of locusts, eating everything in their path, organic matter, metal, energy itself. Nothing was safe, nothing could stop them. Ancient races of that time had fought a war that lasted 10,000 years. They lost billions of lives, destroyed thousands of worlds, and nearly went extinct themselves. In the end, they managed to drive the Kthvari to the edge of known space and put them into a forced hibernation using technology that was now lost. For 50,000 years, the galaxy forgot about the Kthvari. They became legends, then myths, then nothing at all. The conquered's history books mentioned them only as ancient monsters that no longer existed. Then something woke them up. The first attack came on the agricultural world of Serra. It was a peaceful planet covered in farms that fed dozens of other worlds. 20 million people lived there, most of them Tellari, a gentle species with blue skin and 4 arms. They spent their lives growing food and raising families. They had never seen war. The Kthvari came from the sky like a storm. Billions of crystalline organisms descended on Serra. Each one was small, about the size of a human hand, shaped like a flying insect, made of sharp purple crystal, but there were so many of them that they blocked out the sun. The sky turned black, and then the screaming began. The Kthvari ate everything. They consumed crops, buildings, vehicles, and people. A single drone could strip the flesh from a body in seconds. A swarm of thousands could destroy a city in minutes. The Tari had no weapons that could stop them. They tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Within 6 hours, Serra was silent. 20 million people were gone. The planet's surface was nothing but bare rock, every trace of life consumed. The distress signal from Serra reached the conquered 3 days later. High Arbiter Zinthal convened an emergency session of the High Assembly. The delegates watched the footage from Seraph and LT Unk and GT's final moments with horror. Even the species without emotions felt something cold moved through their minds. What is this? Demanded the Kesser delegate, a tall being made of living metal. What attacked Serra? Unknown, Zinthal replied. Its compound eyes moved rapidly, a sign of stress. The organisms match nothing in our databases. They appear to be silicon-based, operating as a hive mind. Ambassador Trell stepped forward. The Valoran had been summoned from the border worlds. When the attack happened, they are Kevari, Trell said. I have studied the ancient texts. This is exactly how the histories describe them. The Kthvari are extinct. Another delegate said. They have been gone for 50,000 years. Clearly they have returned. Concord mobilized its entire military fleet. 3,000 warships gathered under the command of Admiral VTH Nas, a decorated Kasari officer who had never lost battle. His flagship, the Eternal Order, was the largest and most powerful ship in the Concord's navy. "We will crush these invaders," VTH Nas announced. "They are primitive organisms. Our technology is far superior. This will be over quickly." The fleet found the Kthvari swarm near the colony world of Bethex. The swarm numbered in the trillions, a cloud of purple crystal that stretched across thousands of kilom. At its center was a massive organism, a queen, or mother, that directed the movements of all the others. VTH Nas gave the order to attack. The battle lasted 11 minutes. The Concord's weapons were designed for precision warfare. Their ships fired carefully aimed beams that destroyed individual targets with maximum efficiency. They had never faced an enemy that had no individual targets. They had never fought something that could lose 1,000,000 drones and not even notice. The Kthvari swarm absorbed the first attack and kept coming. Crystalline drones were adaptive. They studied the Concord's weapons and changed their structure to resist them. The beams that killed thousands in the first minute killed only hundreds in the second minute and dozens in the third. Then the swarm reached the fleet. The drones did not just attack the ships. They ate them. They consumed metal, energy, and crew with equal hunger. The Eternal Order, the pride of the Concord Navy, was covered in purple crystal. Within minutes, Admiral VTH Nas managed to send one final message before his ship went silent. "We need help. We cannot win this." Of the 3,000 ships that entered the battle, fewer than 200 escaped. The rest were consumed by the swarm, their materials absorbed to create more drones. The Kthari were not just winning, they were growing stronger. With every victory, system after system fell. The swarm moved toward the core worlds of the Concord, eating everything in its path. Refugees fled in every direction, overwhelming the planets that were still safe. The carefully maintained order of the Concord collapsed into chaos on Velos Prime. Zenthal watched the reports come in with something that might have been despair. The compound eyes that had shown such confidence when expelling humanity now flickered with fear. "What do we do?" asked the delegate. "Our fleet is destroyed. Our weapons do not work. How do we stop them?" No one had an answer. Then Ambassador Trell stepped forward. The silver-furred Valoran looked older than before, tired from the weight of watching a galaxy die. "There is one species that fights like the Kthvari," Trell said quietly, "relentless, adaptive, unpredictable. They do not follow rules. They do not give up. They find ways to win even when all logic says they should lose." Zenthal's body went still. "You cannot mean we expelled them because they frightened us? We called them chaos, called them dangerous. We were right, they are dangerous. They are the most dangerous species this galaxy has ever seen." Trell looked around at the terrified delegates, "And right now they are the only hope we have. The humans will never help us," said another delegate. "Not after what we did to them." "Perhaps not," Trell agreed. "But we must ask, we must beg if necessary, because if we do not, there will be no Concord left to regret our pride." Zenthal was silent for a long moment. The great insectoid leader who had cast humanity out of the stars now faced the consequences of that decision. The order it had sought to protect was crumbling. The rules it had enforced were meaningless against an enemy that did not follow any rules at all. Send the message, Zenthal said finally. Contact the humans, tell them. Arbiter paused, struggling with words it had never expected to say. Tell them we're wrong, tell them we need their help, tell them that the galaxy is dying, and they are our only hope. The message was sent, and across the vast emptiness of space in the territory where humanity had built its new home, the signal was received. The galaxy had rejected humanity, now it was calling them back. The question was whether humanity would answer. The message arrived on Admiral Sophie Grant's 63rd birthday. She was in her quarters on the space station's light, eating a small piece of cake alone when her communication officer called her to the command center. Sophie walked through the corridors of the station, nodding to the soldiers and workers who saluted as she passed. In 5 years she had transformed humanity's scattered refugees into a united force. She had built the fleet that now protected human space. She had never stopped preparing for a day she hoped would never come. The command center was buzzing with activity when she arrived. Officers stood at their stations, staring at screens with expressions of shock and confusion. Sophie walked to the main display and read the message that glowed therein. Alien script already translated into English. It was from High Arbiter Zenthal, the same being that had expelled humanity from the stars 5 years ago. The message described the Kethi attack. It listed the worlds that had fallen: Sarah Bethex, Venor Kai's Prime, a dozen others, each name representing millions of dead. The message described the failure of the conquered fleet, 3,000 ships destroyed in minutes. It described the swarm growing larger with every victory, moving toward the core worlds. And then came the request: we were wrong to cast you out. We ask for your help, we beg for your help. Without you we will die. Sophie read the message 3 times. Each time she felt something different. First anger, then sadness, then something she could not name. She called a meeting of her senior staff. They gathered in the conference room, the same people who had stood beside her through the exile and the rebuilding. Captain Jack Morrison, now gray-haired and weathered but still strong. Kate Holloway, who had translated the words of their exile and now translated this plea for help. Danny Park, whose engineering genius had given humanity faster ships and better weapons. Lisa Vance, whose medical advances had saved countless lives. Ben Taus, who had trained a new generation of human soldiers. Sophie placed the message on the table for all of them to see. The conquered is dying, she said. Simply, they want us to save them. Room was silent for a long moment. They threw us out, Benner said. His voice was calm, but his hands were clenched. They called us animals. They took our homes. They made us refugees in our own galaxy. And now they want our help. People are dying, Kate Holloway said softly. Billions of people, species we have never met, children who had nothing to do with the vote that expelled us. Conquered made their choice. Danny Park said they wanted a galaxy without humans. Now they have it. Why should we care what happens to them? Lisa Vance shook her head. Because we are not like them. That is the whole point, is it not? They expelled us because we cared too much, because we formed connections, because we could not treat other species as statistics and trade agreements. She Looked around the table. If we abandon them now, we become exactly what they accused us of being, animals who only care about themselves. Jack Morrison had been quiet until now. The old captain looked at the message with tired eyes. That had seen too much. 5 years ago I asked them what we did wrong, Jack said. They told me we were chaos, we were unpredictable. We did not belong in their perfect, ordered galaxy. He paused. They were right, we do not belong in a galaxy where logic means abandoning people to die. We do not belong in a galaxy where being safe means being cold. So what do we do? Sophie asked. Jack met her eyes. We answer, we help, we save them, not because they deserve it, not because they asked nicely. We save them because that is who we are, that is what makes us human. Sophie nodded slowly. She had known what the answer would be before she asked the question. She had known her people. They were angry. Yes, they were hurt, but they were also incapable of watching others suffer when they had the power to help prepare the fleet. Sophie said, we leave in 12 hours, on the carrier Liberty. Commander Maria Santos gathered her fighter squadron. The ready room, among them was Ethan Cole, now 28 years old, one of the best pilots in the human fleet. He sat with his squadmates, waiting to hear what their commander would say. Maria stood at the front of the room, looking at the young men and women who had trained for this moment their entire adult lives. You know what is happening in conquered space, Maria said. You know who is asking for our help. Some of you lost family during the evacuation. Some of you grew up hearing stories about the day the galaxy rejected us. She paused. I am not going to pretend this is easy. I'm not going to tell you to forget what they did. She walked slowly among the rows of pilots. But I am going to tell you something my mother told me when I was young. She said that anyone can be kind to people who are kind to them. That is not special, that is just trade. Being kind to people who hurt you, helping people who do not deserve it. That is what separates the good from the great. Maria stopped at the front of the room again. The conquered called us chaos. They called us dangerous. They were right. We are dangerous. We are dangerous to anyone who threatens the innocent. We are dangerous to anything that feeds on the weak. Today we fly to save people who turn their backs on us. We fly to fight an enemy that has never been defeated. We fly because there are children in that galaxy who are scared, and we are the only ones who can protect them. She looked at Ethan. He thought of his parents who had dreamed of a day when humans and aliens would be true partners. They had not lived to see that dream, but maybe he could. When do we leave? Ethan asked. Maria smiled. It was a warrior smile, fierce and proud. Now Admiral Sophie Grant addressed the entire human fleet. From the bridge of the dreadnought Horizon, 300 warships waited in formation, ready to jump to conquered space. On every ship, humans watched their admiral on screens and waited for her words. 5 years ago the galaxy cast us out, Sophie said. They called us chaos. They called us dangerous. They said we did not belong among civilized species. She paused. They were not entirely wrong. We are dangerous. We are unpredictable. We do things that make no logical sense, like flying across the galaxy to save people who hurt us. Her voice grew stronger. But that is our greatest strength. We are not bound by logic. We are not limited by rules. We love fiercely, fight relentlessly. And never give up. The Keth have never faced anything like us. The conquered has never seen what we can do when we are united and determined. Sophie looked at the stars on her view screen. Today we return to a galaxy that rejected us. Today we show them what they lost. Today we remind the universe why humanity will never be forgotten. She raised her hand. All ships jump to hyperspace. We have a galaxy to save. The fleet disappeared in flashes of light, racing toward the battle that would decide the fate of everything. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace. Above the world of Theos, it was one of the last major strongholds of the conquered, a planet of 3 billion people protected by the final remnants of the alien navy. Below them, the Kithvari swarm covered the sky like a living storm of purple crystal. Billions of drones moved as one, preparing to consume another world. Admiral VTH Nas commanded the conquered defenders from the bridge of his crippled flagship. The Kesari officer had survived the first battle, but only barely. His ship was damaged, his fleet was broken, and his hope was gone. He had watched the galaxy's greatest military force destroyed in minutes. He knew there was no way to win. Then his sensors detected the human ships. 300 warships formed a battle line between the swarm and the planet. They were smaller than the conquered vessels, but they moved differently. While conquered ships flew in perfect formations, following exact protocols, the human ships flowed like water, constantly adjusting, constantly adapting. Human vessels, VTH Nas said into his communicator. His voice was heavy with shame. This is Admiral VTH Nas of the Galactic Conquered. We are grateful for your assistance, Admiral Sophie. Grant's voice came back calm and steady. Save your gratitude for after we win. Right now, get your ships behind our line and protect the evacuation transports. You cannot win, VTH Nas said. We have tried everything. Our weapons do not work against them. Your weapons, Sophie replied, not ours. On the bridge of the horizon, Sophie turned to her officers. Danny Park stood at the weapons console, his fingers ready. Kate Holloway monitored communications. Jack Morrison commanded the fleet's tactical display. All ships, Sophie said, her voice broadcasting to every human vessel. Show them what we learned in the quiet years. The Horizon's main guns fired. The beams that struck the swarm were not like anything the conquered had used. Human scientists had spent 5 years studying energy weapons, improving them in ways the conquered had said were impossible. The beams did not just destroy the drones, they disrupted their crystal structure, causing chain reactions that spread from drone to drone. Thousands of Kithvari exploded in the first second, tens of thousands more. In the second the swarm reacted, it adapted just as it had against the conquered fleet, but the humans were ready. They changed their weapon frequencies faster than the swarm could adjust. They attacked from multiple angles, using tactics that followed no predictable pattern. In the fighter bays of the carrier Liberty, Ethan Cole climbed into his cockpit. Around him, the pilots of Shadow Squadron did the same. Commander Maria Santos spoke to them through their helmet communicators. Remember your training, trust your instincts, watch out for each other, and show these crystal bugs what human pilots can do. The fighters launched into the chaos of battle. Ethan flew at the tip of the formation, his hands moving across the controls with the skill of 5 years of Constant practice. Enemy drones filled his vision, but he did not feel fear, he felt focus, human. Fighters were designed differently then. Conquered ships, they were built for pilots who thought fast and acted. Faster, they could turn sharper, accelerate quicker, and change direction in ways that seemed impossible. Kathy, used to fighting enemies who moved in predictable patterns, could not track them. Ethan shot down 10 drones in his first minute of combat. Around him, his squadmates did the same. They flew together, covering each other, each pilot knowing exactly where the others would be without needing to communicate. The swarm began to change its strategy. A massive organism emerged from the center of the cloud, a swarm mother the size of a small moon. It was the heart of the hive mind, the creature that controlled all the others. Energy crackled around its crystalline body as it prepared to release a wave that would disable every ship in the area. Ethan saw it first. His instrument showed the energy building inside the swarm mother. He also saw something else, a thermal vent on the creature's side that opened when it prepared to attack. A weakness. All units follow my lead, Ethan called. He pushed his fighter to maximum speed, diving straight toward the monster. Ethan, that is suicide. Another pilot shouted, "Trust me, Shadow Squadron." Followed 20 fighters racing toward a creature that could destroy them all. With a thought, the swarm mother saw them coming and opened its thermal vent, wider, preparing to fire. At the last possible second, Ethan fired every weapon his fighter carried directly into the vent. The explosion was visible from orbit. The swarm mother's internal systems overloaded, the chain reaction spreading through its crystalline body. It screamed, a sound that echoed through the hive mind and stunned every drone in the swarm. All ships fire now, Sophie commanded. The human fleet unleashed everything they had. Beams of energy tore through the confused swarm. Missiles exploded among the disoriented drones. Human fighters hunted down the largest clusters while the big ships destroyed the rest. On the ground, human Marines led by Captain Nick Rivera fought beside conquered troops. They protected evacuation shuttles, rescued trapped civilians, and held defensive lines against drones that made it through the space battle. Humans and aliens fought back to back, united against a common enemy. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the swarm was broken. Trillions of drones were destroyed, their crystal bodies floating lifeless in space. The survivors scattered, fleeing to the edges of the galaxy where they would sleep again, perhaps for another 50,000 years. Theos was saved. The conquered was saved. The galaxy survived. On Valo's Prime High, Arbiter Zenthal requested a private meeting with Admiral Sophie Grant. They met in the same crystal chamber where humanity had been expelled 5 years ago. This time, Zenthal did not stand tall and proud. The ancient insectoid lowered its head in submission. "We were wrong," Zenthal said. "We feared what we did not understand. Your chaos, your unpredictability, your emotions. These are not weaknesses, they are strengths we desperately need." The conquered has survived for 12,000 years because we followed rules. But rules could not save us today. Only humanity could. Sophie studied the being who had once condemned her species. She thought of all the pain, all the loss, all the years of exile, and she made a choice that only a human would make. "We will not forget what happened," Sophie said, "but we can move forward together." 6 months later, the Treaty of New Dawn was signed. Humanity rejoined the Galactic Concord, but this time as full partners. A human sat on the High Council. Human colonies returned to conquered space. Human engineers, scientists, doctors, and artists spread across the stars once more. On New Haven, Ethan Cole received the Concord's highest military honor. Commander Maria Santos pinned the medal to his chest while thousands cheered. Afterward, she found him looking up at the stars. What now? She asked. Ethan smiled. The stars that had once rejected him now welcomed him back. The galaxy that had called humanity chaos now called them heroes. We do what we have always done, he said. We keep moving forward. The galaxy had tried to exist without humanity. It had learned the hard way that some chaos was necessary, some unpredictability kept the universe alive, and some species, no matter how much trouble they caused, were worth keeping around. Humanity was home, and this time they were here to stay.